Good morning. Welcome to the Heal Out Loud podcast. Today we have a guest by the name of Sarah. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I am an angel card reader. I created a system called Angelic Star Connections. Basically, when I started studying, I studied astrology for many, many decades, and I wanted something to sort of fold into that study. And I looked at tarot, and it wasn't quite a match, so I kept looking, and I found angels, and I realized that angels have jobs. And then when I realized that, I I saw connections between the angels' jobs and the astrological wheel. And so I created my system and used that for astrological and angel card readings together. It's very fun.
That sounds amazing. So, we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about the intention for the podcast. So, my intention for this series, but the podcast in general, is to bring more awareness to intuition, to let light workers and future light workers know that they're not alone, that everything that they're moving through and growing through is a part of their soul's journey here on earth. And this series just happened to be about awakening, and what does that even mean and what does it look like. And I picked 10 beautiful people to express their journey to awakening and what that even means for them, because it means a little bit something different for everyone. And is this something that you grew up knowing? How did you get into even any of it, and how did it evolve over time? Like, what was your experience as a child with your intuition?
That's really interesting to ask because I I wouldn't say that I was tuned in consciously as a little kid, although I think I definitely relied on my angels through animating my stuffed toys. I know that sounds crazy, but I remember when I was 18 months old and having a tea party in my crib. That's my earliest memory. And I truly believe that my angels talked to me through them. I don't remember what they said, but I was left alone a lot as a kid in my crib. And I think they actually came through to me. But fast forward to when I was, again, another odd, interesting story. When I was playing Yahtzee with a friend of mine, and apparently I had correctly guessed her role. She looked up at me and she goes, "Did you know you just guessed my roles right 3 times in a row?" And I went, "No, I didn't even notice."
Three
And
times
sure
in a
enough,
row.
3 times in a row, yeah. And she goes, "Well, do you want to try again?" I said, "Sure." And I did. I guessed 10 or 11 times, and then I noticed that um, they started like dissipating, I'll say. And what I realized, not right then, but over time, is that you sort of have to fill the well. So you can't be on all the time, just like a job, you need a break. Um, so that was the earliest. And then the interesting thing, and this really plays a part in my readings now, um, fast forward another decade, and I was in a place called Terezin. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it was in the Czech Republic, and it was one of the concentration camps. And it was, yeah, it was a working camp, so they didn't have gas chambers or anything like that, thank God. Um, but I walked past one door, and the door was open, and I had no idea what was in the room. But as I walked through the door, Genine, tears fell down my face. And I went, "Oh my God, what is in here?" It was dirt from all the camps in installation. And I
Mm.
didn't know that, but my body knew that. And so when I do readings now, people come through who passed on. Generally, not always, but usually the people who come through, they passed on. And I've learned to read my body and who's coming through and how they're coming through. So that's sort of a bit of my evolution
I
as a
love
reader.
that. And it's so funny as you're talking in the importance of even doing this. I have a story to each story that you just told.
I love that.
Yeah, and really quick, I'm just gonna run through them. The teddy
Yeah.
bears, and the dolls. My mom, she communicates with plants and animals, and she doesn't even do this work. She's just so spiritually gifted, but not on purpose. You know, it's like, and
Right.
that's the thing. We are who we are, whether we acknowledge it or not. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very important to stretch that message to the collective. Like, your calling is your calling, you know? And so
Okay.
people know that you're doing this work, whether you're doing it knowingly or not, you know, on some
Right.
capacity. And I remember one of a really good friend of mine gifted my mom a bag full of teddy bears because she knew how much she loved them. And she dropped them off at my aunt's house. And my cousin told me that she took two of the bears out because they were so cute. She just had to have them. And
I
so
love
I
that.
picked the bears up and I took them to my mom. And she was like, "This isn't all of the bears." And I was like, "What do you mean? Did she tell you certain bears that she sent?" She's like, "No, she just told me. She didn't tell me a number or nothing." She's like, "But the bears told me that they had two sisters and someone took them out the bag." And she used to always say stuff like this to me, but at that moment, I knew because I told my cousin she could have them because she did ask. I'm like, "Yeah, she doesn't know what she's getting. Just go ahead and take two out that you
Right.
wanted." She knew, and I'm like, "Holy crap." You know, all the time I
Wow.
thought she was crazy, but you are like, you know, and then that defines like what is crazy. Like, really spiritually gifted people are on a lot of time thought of as being crazy. And even like you think of mental illnesses, right? Because we want to label words to mean something, demeaning, and all of these different things. But you know, some of the things that we consider not good was really high elevational energetically things at one point, and people don't know that or even talk about that a lot, and that's a whole nother series that we can go
Well, that's
into.
it's interesting. I have a friend of mine, Jonathan. He does this work too. I just thought of him for your podcast. You might like him on here. But anyway, he and I did a fair together, and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to sort of how we wanted to get it out there, like you're doing. And we both like the word the unseen. We work with the
Hmm.
unseen realm. So yeah,
Yeah.
and your mom apparently did too. She just that's amazing. It's just
Yeah,
amazing.
it's amazing some of the things that we do. And here just recently I was looking to do a retreat here in San Diego. So I was viewing some places for the retreat. And I was at this beautiful resort, and I was looking at the conferences rooms and they were right next to each other. I walked in this one and it just felt like it was a little breath of heaven. I mean, the room was cold and still in an angelic way. It was a
Yes.
really beautiful, soft energy in there. And then I
Oh.
went right next door, like they shared a wall, to the next room. And I'm looking at my husband because he was with me and the young lady who was sending us on a tour. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, night and day energy. I'm like, the energy in here is so heavy. I'm like, do you feel it? And she's like, no, like literally, I couldn't spend more than 2 minutes in the room. I'm like, okay, I've seen enough of this room. I was like, this room needs a
Right.
clearing. I had to walk out,
Right.
start beating my hands on the ground, stumping my feet, like really moving the energy. It was that
Wow.
heavy. And she was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you can feel that? Like the
Yeah.
difference. And then so she confirmed, she was like, you know, the people who were in here before, she's like, I can't tell you who they were for
Right.
confidentiality. She was like, but it was a heavy energy. So the fact that you could feel that, you know, and she was, and they couldn't.
That's the interesting thing is that some people can feel it and some people can't. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly why we're attuned,
Well, I
except
think
that I think that I've come to this understanding that people who are highly sensitive, like yourself and myself, are here to help people get in touch with the unseen realm.
absolutely. And it's like being empathic, but it's even a step above empath, you know, because when you're
Mm,
empathic, you feel other people's energy intensely in other just realms too. But when you can just feel the frequency of the room, that it deeply affects you or take you completely. And sometimes what it does is it's like, I feel like I just went to somewhere else and came back.
Yes.
And I'm like, where
Yes.
was I? I was totally checked out. That happens
Yes.
as well. And the reason why I went on to even share extra stories to combat your stories or to advance and with your stories is because, and that wasn't the word I was looking for. I was looking for a
Compliment.
different word.
I think you were looking for the word compliment.
Compliment. There you go. To compliment your stories is because I know that this is very common, but people just don't understand it. Like I'll go to Walmart and like if I don't put protection up when I walk in Walmart, holy hell, I feel I'm like, oh, I forgot to put my energy box up. Like you feel the difference when you walk in Walmart and just the energy and the frequency of the people. Like you literally feel the shift the moment you walk in the door. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one. People are feeling it and they don't even know why. Like, you want to go to Walmart. You even like shopping at Walmart, but there's always that resistance to going to Walmart. I've been going to Walmart for 4 days now.
My friend Ralph says, he says, is it your feeling? Are you sure you're feeling your feelings? I think that's a really good question for people to ask. Because sometimes you'll just be going through, I can tell us, if you want me to tell a story, this is a tough story. If you want to hear it, I will tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. This happened several years ago. And I might cry. If I cry, I apologize in advance. Not because I have anything against crying. I just wasn't expecting to do so. I'm all for good cleansing tears. Anyway, several years ago, I was just sad. I was crying like every day. I was crying like just out of the blue. This was, I don't know. You could look up the date, but because of what happened, I could look up the date. But anyway, I remember I was driving home and I just kept just getting like completely choked up and just crying, and 3 days in a row. And my mom called me, and her best friend's granddaughter, who was like 19, had overdosed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just like, it was like, go back to that doorway. My body knew this was going on. I didn't know, intellectually in my head, but my body knew, my soul knew. It's interesting too, because I was watching a piece on, it was like Nova or one of those shows recently. And they found that, it's actually scientific what we're talking about. There's a name that they say, yeah. And I've been saying that for years. I said, they're going to prove what we know scientifically. And it's not entrapment, but it's like, they've put some big name on it. But basically, when one atom does something in this arena, it does the same thing in this arena. And basically they use like tossing coins. And they said if this coin tosses and gets heads up or tails up, the other one does thousands of miles away. And that's what we're basically seeing. And when I think of the name, it'll pop up and I'll just jump out and tell you. Entanglement, I think it's called. I think it's called entanglement. Anyway, so that's what we're feeling. We're like the sensors.
Yeah, you entangle with other people's energy, and it happens so many different ways. I was talking to my sister the other day, and I asked her what she was cooking for dinner, and she told me that she was gonna cook something one day and something the next day. The next day, she said she was cooking chicken and dumplings, and I was like, oh, so we had this whole conversation about chicken and dumplings. I don't really care for them, but they're a family staple. I think I'm the only one who don't really. I only like my mom's because I'm a texture person, and her dumplings are just to die for. And I'm like, do you know how to make dumplings like mom? So that was the whole conversation.
Right.
Laughing about
that could be a podcast right there.
Yeah. And then the next day I called her and I said, what did you wind up cooking for dinner? And she was like, oh, I'm making baked ziti. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm making baked ziti. So it was just, I was like, you wasn't supposed to make baked ziti. What happened? So like some kind of way our energy connected as we were thinking about making baked ziti, and we were talking about, and I didn't tell her I was making it the day before. So that was like an instant where that happened. But you know, the thing that I think is important for people to know is that that gut feeling that we so widely speak about is so much more than just that gut feeling, you know?
Okay, yeah, I see that. It's interesting. I've been starting to learn to listen. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
writing a book about that, because it's a process to learn to listen unless you're raised with really following your gut. And I think so many people are so busy that they don't necessarily even think about teaching their kids that. But I think if you're raised to learn to listen to your gut, then you know how to hone in. Otherwise, it's sort of a process of like, oh, wait, that's that's not working. And what I found is like if I'm starting to do something and it's not working, like on the computer or or my car even, I'll just take a moment and go, wait, what's going on here? Like a lot of times I'll go to buy like concert tickets or a play tickets to a play, and it won't be working. And I'm like, what is going on? And
Hmm.
then this just happened actually. I'm going to see Jaja's hair braiding and on
Okay.
next this week or next week. And anyway, and I was trying to get tickets, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but my computer just was not playing. And then Memorial Day weekend, they had a 35% off sale. And that, to me, that was the angels. That was the angels saying, nope, this isn't it. This isn't, and so I'm trying to like not bang my head against the wall and listen. So it's a process
Yeah,
though.
I love that because exactly what you said about how you grew up and learning to listen. But what I've come to understand even recently is that there's levels to not only
Mhm.
listening, to understanding. Like Jim Rome, I absolutely adore him, and he's a motivational speaker for those who don't know who he is. Um,
Sounds familiar, but I'm not
you
conjuring a
can look
picture, but
him up on
yeah.
YouTube. I mean, it's
Okay.
he's a speaker, but
Yeah.
he's more in the motivational and inspirational speaker.
Okay.
And I remember driving my daughter to school and we would listen to Jim Rohn. So, like, as you say, listening, like, these are things that we were instilling in her very young to
Right.
have the motivation and to listen and do all of these things. But even me, myself, like, I remember he would say things like, you're getting better. And he would say, like, this message is for you, but it may not be for you right now. And
Yeah.
I took that and I listened to that, and like I can really see points where I heard it and I understood it at that moment to where my knowledge was. And I like to tell people, even when taking my courses and different things like that, the information meets you where you are.
Right.
So, and that's why everyone gets something different from an experience, no matter what the experience is, a concert,
Right.
a meal, a
Right.
conversation. You know, two people can be in the same room listening to a speaker, and one person get uplifted and the other person feel put down. Why is that?
Right. That's a
You
very,
know,
I tend to think that might have something to do with astrological influences. It may not, but it very
it.
much can. Like if you have a different moon than somebody, it's interesting with children. A lot of times each child will have a different experience of their parents. And
Mhm.
if you look at their moon signs, it will tell you a lot about how individual children experience their parents.
Yeah, and
Very
I was going to say
interesting.
that even if they grew up in the same household, you experience life much different. And it's like
Exactly.
through my lenses, I see
Right.
life this way, and that goes into people who, because I do a lot of self love work. And what I found
Mm.
out in my work is as I'm guiding people to go within and to be more intentional about that journey to self love, almost everybody that I have ever worked with, I realize that they're living a large version, if not their whole life, through the lens of others.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
How
and
so? Will you say more about that?
absolutely. So, what that looks like is before you knew who you were taught and told who you were supposed to be. Some parents even choose your career for you. Just think about
Wow.
um you like certain things, so then your parents put you like you do flips, so your parents like, oh, she's a gymnastic, and then they throw
Oh,
you in gymnastics, and maybe you might not like doing flips, but that don't mean you wanted to do that as a career. But you learned to love it and you grew to love it, but was it really your choice? Just because you learn to
interesting.
do flips and you like flipping doesn't mean that you want to be a gymnast.
Right.
But it was instilled in you and installed in you that this is who you're gonna be. And then it's like,
Wow.
oh, this is my little tennis player. And then you follow that because it was instilled in you that that's what you were gonna be. And
Interesting.
maybe or maybe not, but it's like we are most of the time coerced into a life of whatever your life is. And it's like, I love this, but this isn't what it's a passion, even maybe, but it's not a purpose. So your passion and your
Right.
purpose is not always the same,
Right. Right.
and then
Yeah.
most of the time it shouldn't be.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I was raised so differently. People don't believe it because I was really like, I told you about being ignored. I really was ignored as a kid. And so it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, basically, I had no boundaries and no feedback. So I had to like make it up for myself. And so I
Mm.
didn't know for the longest time what I wanted to do or who I was, or I mean, I was completely lost for a very long time. And not necessarily in a bad way, because in a way it's freeing. It's there's no bounds. So I was never given like you should do this or you should do. My mom was a lawyer and she kind of had hopes that I would be that, but I opened one LSAT pretest and went, that's when
Thanks,
you
but
when you
no
score
thanks.
51 on a pretest without even going in, that's not for you. But anyway, so I think it's interesting. Maybe that's part of the reason that I tap into intuition is that I don't understand people in some ways. I was raised so out of bounds that
Now, are you your only child?
no, I have two older brothers.
And
My
how
mom was
did?
very mentally ill. My mom was
Mhm,
very, very mentally ill. She had stints in psychiatric hospitals, and she self-medicated for years with alcohol.
mhm.
So it was just a very unstable, unusual environment, and um, that's a whole nother thing. But I do think it's why I am so sensitive to people without speaking, because I was raised in a home that you've seen and not heard. So if you listen and watch people, you get a lot of information.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And again, when we talk about being mentally ill, and a lot of times, even working with people or being around people like, with mental illnesses enhances your intuition because you have to be on more alert. It's like, and I don't know if you experience this or if you could speak to being able to sense an episode before it came on.
I wish I had. I really wish I could have, but no. And my mom's mental illness was so erratic. It was atypical. Literally,
Mhm.
that's what the label was, atypical bipolar or something like that, disorder. And she would just, and I was a kid too. So I wasn't like looking for something, but right, actually it might have been like triggering that. It was right around the same time the Yahtzee thing happened that I remember her first breakdown. Now she had other breakdowns before that, but I was too young to remember. And My parents split up, but no, other people noticed, but I was kind of entrenched in it, so I didn't notice anything different. My mom was just kind of odd. But I do think that I think that when she's mentally ill, basically what happens is the veil lifts and then you can see everything that's there. And that's what I was talking about before, that people like you and I who have feel the sensitivity see through part of that veil, because basically what happened about a year ago, I was looking out over the water on the East Coast, and I was asking, like, why haven't I had one of those like special see the angels kind of moments? I was feeling a little FOMO, right? Left out of like that precious moment. And the angels came to me on the water and they said, just mentally, they said, there's so much there that people need to see what you can feel, because a lot of people they're not comfortable with it. And so giving me one experience of one big angel would be nice and all, but that's not what I need for what I do. So I just think that when my mom, couldn't take the world because it was overwhelming, she would just let her veil open up and let it to everything in so nothing could come in, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that is someone out here that's fully resonating with this, and then also getting breakthroughs out loud because of it.
Right.
Right.
I also believe, just as a like, I think it's really pivotal and really important that I really believe that if my mom had better nurturing, excuse me, and I love my grandmother, excuse me, she was my best friend. Both my grandmas were my best friends, but they were ill-equipped to deal with mental illness. And I think that if they were healthier about addressing mental health and talking about it, it would have perhaps been mitigated in terms of medication or therapy or whatever. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know that, but I will say that it was so stigmatized that nobody wanted to talk about it when I was a kid. I mean, I didn't want to talk about it. I was like, oh my gosh, nobody can know this. This is terrifying, So I do think that life is getting better about mental health. People are talking about it. I mean, my kids know what SSRIs are. I had no idea. I barely even know what they are now.
Right.
So, I do think there's a lot of progress. Not to say that I'm saying that the more we can acknowledge what's going on in here by verbalizing it and getting some sort of health check, I think the healthier we become. But again, I'm not a doctor. That's my experience of it.
I am a firm believer in that as well. And I wanted to back up and just talk about water, because you mentioned being at the lake, and water is
water is my sacred space.
Yeah, mine as well. But there's magic in water, right? And then we are 90% water, crystallized, all of these things. But
about 76% water, but yeah, it's very reflective of the oceans. Imagine the oceans. The oceans are as much water as we are, apparent to the word earth. Like there's and I haven't really thought about that in depth. I should think about that.
Like, I haven't fully thought about it in depth either, but what I have thought about in depth was the feeling I get when I'm at the ocean. It's, I go to the lake, but it's something about the ocean for me that is like awakening. And I used to look over the ocean and like just kind of cast my dreams out into the water.
Nice.
Not even on purpose, but it's one of those places where I dare to dream the biggest. And the
That's
more
wonderful.
the more that I understand about frequencies, intuition, and all of these things, it's really become quite enlightening to me that I've always done that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's the importance of understanding. And of course, I'm here in San Diego County, and I went to La Jolla Cove,
Oh,
and
gorgeous. Gorgeous.
yeah,
I was
and
just in La Jolla last week for a friend of mine's book. Yeah, what was it last week? Anyway, it was
yeah.
for
So
author talk.
what happened was I was sitting there one morning, and I always get these strong nudges to go to the beach when I need a deep cleansing and clearing.
Yep.
So I went, and I actually took like a drum, and I was just sitting out there by myself, and I was playing the drum, and I was singing, and I was releasing.
Nice.
And I do like
Yep.
these voice healings
Mm-hmm.
with others, but on myself as well.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that, and I was like humming the words that I needed to release. And then I started
Nice.
crying, and it was just this beautiful release. And then I opened up my eyes, and there were like literally sacred geometry symbols just floating in front of me.
Yeah.
And I had
Yeah.
never had that happen to me in such a way before. And I'm looking, and I'm like, okay, maybe something's in my eyes because I was crying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. So I started to like ask questions. And it's only ever happened to me at La Jolla.
Oh, interesting.
And,
So
and
there's
I,
something
I
there.
went
Yeah.
back a second time, and it did the same thing, not as like expansive as the first time, but it was really a magical moment,
Yes.
and just my clarity, and just a beautiful gift. So it's definitely, and I've known it for a very long time, something healing and expanding about the frequency of water.
Well, you saw through the veil too. Again, basically, there's so much available. You spoke to so many things, Genine, that I'm like, oh, talk about all these things. I could geek out all day about this stuff. First of all, I just want to say that tears, they've done, again, my background is sort of science, so it's kind of funny to be here in this sort of unsciencing thing, but I really truly believe that science will prove what we do. Like I said just the other day, the entanglement thing. But anyway, tears, they've done studies about tears just because it does play to water. I mean, they're salty tears, right? Um, but also because of what water represents. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to say that they've done studies with tears that people who chop onions don't have the same kind of tears that people who cry real tears. The people who cry real tears, and I mean, they obviously can be the same people, but the studies show that there are toxins in tears released when it's emotional. And that to me flabbergasting. I was like, whoa. That, and because I used to have a counselor at school. It was like, you need a good cry. And I was like, okay. And sure enough, I needed a good cry because I mean, crying like for real. And I always felt better. And it's because we're releasing tears. So, I'm going to use the word God. You want to use create. I like creator. I like that. But we were created to cry. So there's a
Yeah,
purpose for that, you know?
it's very soul cleansing. And then also, when you're on this journey of awakening, and you're in a spiritual space like that, and you're crying, it's a part of your soul's evolution of arising to that next level of consciousness as
Right.
well.
Right. It clears out that stuff that it's been
Yeah,
building up. Yeah. Big time. That's been sort of a block. It's almost like a dam, and the dam breaks and then you can see something else. I feel like that's what happened with La Jolla. You saw through the veil. You
yeah,
you, you got to a frequency where you could see just a smidgen of the whole geodesic reality that is celestial and earthly and beyond what we can really even imagine because it's
yeah.
so much. Yeah, it's very cool.
And there's sacred geometry around us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it's
Yeah,
just we can't see it. But the brief
exactly.
moment that I was able to see it, it was so beautiful. I do have a couple of questions for you, because this is about the journey to awakening in whatever that means for the people who are listening at the capacity that they're at, what would you say was that moment when you realized that you were on a spiritual journey, and what did that look like for you?
Gosh. I mean, I can't honestly say that there was one moment because I've always relied on the internal. I've always done that. But I will say that I I also like went to youth group in a metaphysical church. And so in that pivotal time of like the tweens, I
Mm.
got that we create our own reality. And I'm not saying I get that every moment of every day. And I am 100% responsible for my reality. I mean, I am, but that's not to say that I take it full responsibility for my reality at every moment. If I did, I would be like the most enlightened person on earth, I think. Anybody who does that is like, then everything in your life is a reflection of you. So
Mhm.
having that pivotal piece is, I mean, it's that happened early. Um, and then the piece of astrology fascinated me so much that um, I had to explore that. I think I mentioned to you about this in one of our conversations, is that it was actually, there was fear. There was fear that I had to face. And I don't really know where it came from because, like I said, my um, family didn't give me a lot of guidance one way or another. And so I can't, like, it wasn't like a fundamental kind of, no, you can't study this, or no, nobody ever said that. But I certainly had some sort of internal fear of like, is that okay to study? I'm not sure. And I won't get into exactly how I broached that fear, but it's an interesting story that's in my book, which is Angelic Star Connections, coming out June 25th. And it goes into the history of how I approached astrology. And it's a fun story. It goes to one of my other grandparents and that story. But once I got past the fear, I just started studying. I got books. I'm doing a talk for San Diego Astrological Society this month, and they have a great library. And I basically studied every one of their books. I just borrowed their books and explored what I was interested in as I got through the fear. That was the big thing. Um, anyway, maybe that answers your questions. Like I said, I could geek out on this stuff all day.
Yeah, I know, totally right. There's no right or wrong answer. It's your experience and how you want to share it. Um,
Well,
let's talk a little bit more about your book and where will people be able to find it at.
Well, before you say that, I think you were saying before we go to there, because I didn't even mean to plug it, just that came up. And as this story, which is when I really knew astrology was real, because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, is astrology? Oh, you believe in that stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, you believe in a hammer? It's a tool, right? You can use it or not. Either way, it works." Uh, anyway, I was looking at charts for the first time, like an actual birth chart. And in I I obviously won't name names, but a friend of mine asked me to do her chart.
Mhm.
And this was early on in my exploration of astrology. And there were indicators of domestic violence in her chart. And I won't go into details, but she was a victim of domestic violence. And I went, oh, wow. There's no making this up. It's
Yeah,
not. Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I've had my chart read and some, like, something that never made sense to me about myself became very clear
Yes.
to me about myself. And I think the importance about charts is that, what sign are you? Just your
Me,
regular birth sign.
I never tell Genine.
Okay.
And astrologers know exactly what that answer means.
Right. So whatever your birth sign is, people go off of all the things to that, but there's so many risings, and I'm not an astrologist, so I don't know all of the
There's a
language,
lot more to
but
it than that. A
it's
lot
so
more.
much more to it, and it's almost a disservice to know so much about whatever the sign is. Like you said, you
Mm.
never tell. I don't know what astrologist is, but that I don't know that.
Let's go with yours. Let's go with yours. What sign are you?
I'm a Leo.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Leos like
Yeah, but
attention, but that's not all they like. They can be very shy.
yeah, exactly. So there's so many levels to me. And a lot of times what people don't know is that, and you can speak to this better than I can, just because you are a Leo, you may be more in the energy of your moon or your rising or however that works. So if you
Hmm.
don't understand all of those things, it's kind of like, but you understand just this one point of it, it can kind of take you on a loop that doesn't serve you.
Well, the sun sign is a factor, right? That can give you, your basic personality chart. Let's just. Last night I was watching Jimmy Fallon, and there were three Virgos on stage, and they all acknowledged that. And they're like, "Oh, it's just Virgo energy." I'm like, "I get that. I know what that means. That means, you're very perfectionistic, and you all work really well together because you have very high expectations, and that is true of a Virgo sun sign, unless it's completely, way out of bounds, which is not likely for a Virgo, because even then they'd be like, but we need to get this done." Right? So that will be the predominant aspect of a lot of your life. But
Hmm.
but also I've seen that like the moon can really feature prominently early on. Like for instance, I'll tell you a little bit about my moon. My moon is very serious. And I needed that when I was a kid because I didn't have a lot of boundaries. So I needed to be responsible as a kid. And that moon kicked in and it said, okay, if you don't get your lunch made, you're gonna have to do it yourself. Whatever that is. If you don't have a way to get into your house, what are you going to do instead? Whatever those things were. And then
Hmm.
after that kicked in, then the sun kicks in a lot of times, not always. And then the rising will be later in life because that's sort of like what you're going to project to the world. And so you're not necessarily projecting your whole self to the world at age 5, right? You're just projecting this small sliver. So it's fascinating to look at a whole chart. It's really interesting to me.
I love that.
Again, I can geek out about all these things.
So tell me, just in your intuition, in your journey, all of these things, how have it enhanced or affected your relationships?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my husband is very supportive. My um, Whereas my previous partners, I've always been monogamous with my long-term partners. Um, they've been my first like my oldest son's father um, was very dismissive and verbally abusive, and I just hadn't come into my power. I didn't have any idea, and I was a young mom with his baby, obviously. And just, it was just not healthy. It was not a healthy relationship. Um, but with time and education and wisdom, I was able to continue those studies. Cause like I said, that was when I was like dabbling interested in astrology, but still like
Hmm.
afraid. And I kind of think it must be a past life that, because there was no like, oh, you shouldn't study that, you shouldn't look into that. But I had it. It was like, oh, I don't know, should I? Anyway, and then with my Saturn return, which happens when you're about 27 to 30, um, I dove in hard. I dove in hard and I started dating better people, getting more serious. And when I got married at 35, my husband, even though he's an engineer, he's not a typical engineer. He studied, for instance, Chinese philosophy as one of his classes in um, college. He's proud of that because a lot of engineers are just very like, you study this and that's it. Um, but he and I dreamt of him 3 times before I married him. I knew he was going to be an aerospace engineer from my
Oh,
dream.
wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
So yeah, and so he's very supportive, and so I just think it's like you say, it's like this process of becoming. it's kind of like what Michelle Obama sort of says, is that we're becoming, and we're becoming aware of our own power. And that's actually why I like being older, because I feel much stronger in my own power. And when you feel stronger in your own power, and I don't mean like wielding power, I mean like I don't have to justify anything, I don't have to explain myself, I can just be, and I don't have to respond or react to anything if I don't want to, which is a huge change. Um, so being in my own power, and like you say, loving yourself, um, loving myself, it's reflected in my relationships. Not that they're all perfect, because they aren't.
Well, they
But
are perfect, but the way that we think of perfect don't really exist.
right. And so I mean to say that, you know, there's conflict and struggle and all of that thing. And there's also, there's times when I say, okay, that relationship no longer serves the highest good. So we'll have to, you know, part ways, and that's okay.
That's a whole nother series of knowing when to let go.
Right. Well, that's the card that you pulled, right? When I when we met.
Yes, absolutely. And let me tell you, it couldn't have came at a better time. I already knew, and it was the version of me that wants people to see themselves more than they want to see themselves. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And what I've come to understand is that that's not my job, but I
Mm.
knew that it was a message, a lesson, and a blessing there for me as well. And I was like, okay, what is it? What is it? What is it? And I'm still stumbling up on it as I close the last little bit of chapters of that business relationship. But beautiful, eye opening, growth. So when you get that many good things from it, there's nothing bad from it, you know?
Right, right. And it can be painful, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not a valuable thing. That,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I mean, you know, growth can be painful, but you know, if you're comfortable fully, you're not really growing and expanding at the elevation that you can be. And then
mm.
also, that's a whole nother thing. What is comfort?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
What is
That's really
comfort, right? Because
yeah.
when you think about comfortability in settling, you're kind of compromising one comfortability for another.
Right. And if it's settling, is that the
Are
version
you
of
really
yourself that
comfortable? Are you comfortable or are you familiar? Because there's a
yeah,
difference. Because familiar and safe doesn't mean comfortable, but
right.
it is tolerable. So it's not
Mm,
comfortable, it's toleration.
right,
And so
right.
you've learned to tolerate this level of uncomfort.
Interesting. That's
Yeah,
interesting. It feels very much like when you're it's not it's going to be a metaphor, but like a rubber band, and it's like it's
absolutely.
only taking so much, and then it's like, okay, no more, and I've got to it's got to snap and then move bigger, you know, you have to move
Yeah,
bigger. Yes.
yeah, exactly. But and it's so funny that you said the rubber band analogy because it's a perfect one that I use in a way of the bandwidth of stretching, right?
Right.
And it's like you don't know how far you can stretch until you stretch. So just
Yeah.
think of putting a rubber band around a bundle of pins and then you
Right.
double it and then you start stuffing more pins in it. So then you have to loosen it up. So now you got to fill it up with some more stuff to take up the extra space. And then
Right.
that becomes full. So it's like, oh, it's stretching and stretching and stretching. So is it going to pop or is it going to continue to stretch? And am I
Mm.
afraid of the pop? And is the pop even wrong?
Right. Is it time for a new vessel,
Yeah, you
like
know, and sometimes when
in
it
terms of
pops,
like
the
mind think?
foundation falls, so then
Yeah.
you rebuild. So it's like it's the ever evolving and growing of something. It's nothing that is broken. It's just time for restructuring. So it's
Yeah.
really about perceptions, and that really goes into that rabbit hole. And we'll be here until next week, right?
I love that. Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting too. I've come to think of us as like a jewel. Like every
Mhm.
person sees outside a different side of the facet of the jewel.
Yeah, I love that.
I do too. I that came to me recently. I was like, yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
I love
And
that. I'll have to
yeah.
listen to that again. So, as we come to the near end of our session, what is the one thing that you could look at someone that's on this journey of self-discovery, intuition, it doesn't matter what you're calling it, enlightenment, awakening, what was the one thing that you would tell even your younger self? As you said, I kept kind of teeter-tottering. What is the message for the collective to say, just answer your calling? What would that message be?
Well, it would be there's nothing to be afraid of, and we are made in the image and likeness of our Creator. What can we not do?
What can we not do? That's it. That's the golden word. What can we not do?
Nothing, basically nothing. We cannot not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have. We
and
yeah.
and as you were talking, I was hearing there's nothing to fear but fear itself.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing to fear. There's just nothing to fear. And I mean, I walk with the spirit world. You
Mhm.
know, I've had my share of departures in this world. And
Yes.
my mom and I had that connection. We both very much believed in angels and the beyond and all of that stuff. So you're never alone. And like I would not tell myself that because I know that, but I think a lot of people feel like you were talking about with wanting to like people please or parent please or be this entity of like work you working for others or being for others. I really think that when you realize that you're never alone, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to be with yourself and listen to what that inner self really wants. Because I think that's what people are afraid of with like the loneliness epidemic. And I do believe that that's a real issue. But when you think about the fact that we all have angels and there are more angels than you could ever count, to know that even when you're alone, there's the this grid that you saw of connectivity, and people want to share. They want to be connected because they innately
Mm-hmm.
know that they are connected. And so just don't be afraid of that. It's completely natural. I mean, this is another great thing that I would also tell people, and it fascinates me. Before we're 2 years old, we don't know we're separate from anything or anyone.
I
And
love
that's
that.
what and that's why we start saying mine at 2, because we're starting to distinguish, oh, this is my shirt. Oh, this is my
You have an
tote.
awareness at that age.
Right. But before that, we are all knowing that we are all one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting back to that. Yeah.
And where can people find you?
tienstarling.com. tienstarling.com.
Thank you so much for your time. It has really been lovely. And we'll have to do this again on one of the other topics.
Sounds good. I'd love to. Thank you for
Okay.
having me. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Likewise. Take care.
Create a beautiful rest of your day, love.
You too, and everybody else. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.